Amen.
Christ is in our midst.
He is never shall be.
Forgive me. In this reading, especially today, of the poor Lazarus and the rich man who has no name, there were two things especially that I wanted to bring out. And that was how the love of God works in our hearts, and also to show how we can look at the mirror of our own soul. During the New Testament and patristic time, some of the church fathers clearly held that everyone went to a place after they died, and this was Hades. Within Hades, they held that there was a separating of the unjust and the just, who were experiencing a foretaste of the sufferings of punishment or of joy. Those who were just, who were in Abraham's bosom or paradise, experienced the foretaste of heaven. Abraham's bosom is understood to be within, but separated itself or walled off. The departed righteous and unrighteous experienced that which was appropriate to each. The word paradise comes from an ancient Persian word that means a walled garden or courtyard, in implying a separation from an area around the garden. In the Septuagint version of the Bible, this word is used also to refer to the Garden of Eden. Abraham's bosom implies being in a close embrace, being in the hallowed form of a doubling of a robe between the arms of the wearer of the robe. So kind of think of like being encased in arms and being covered and protected in that embrace. In the gospel of the rich man and Lazarus, the rich man and Lazarus can see and talk to one another, although they are far off from each. In Luke 16:23 it says, "And being in torment in Hades, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham afar off and Lazarus in his bosom." The bosom of Abraham here does represent God's bosom. All of them are in God's presence, but one is in torment and the other one is in a state of comfort. Lazarus, who did not care for the personal pleasure or possessions, spent his life pursuing God, and then in the afterlife basks in God's glory and in his presence. The rich man, on the other hand, pursued in his own selfish desires during his life, and in doing so ended up in pain when in God's presence because of the sin in his own heart. The rich man, or Abraham says to the rich man in the 25th verse, "Son, remember that in your lifetime you received good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things, but now he is comforted and you are tormented." See how we contrast but now, meaning in death. One is comforted and the other one is tormented. Nowhere in the text does it say that God is punishing him. He is simply in torment while he is there. They are separated by a large gulf, which is primarily spiritual and not physical. It is a gulf that exists in the heart. It is a spiritual gulf that causes us to experience God's love and his presence as either paradise or torment. A gulf that was not placed there by God, but rather created by the choices, actions, and state of the sinner. And this is a glimpse of how God and his love works in our own hearts. And it also shows us a mirror to our own souls. Some mirrors, when we look in them, tell the truth about a person, and some tell a lie. When we look at a mirror, maybe it's in the bathroom when we're getting ready, we can see good things. We can see wounds. We can see our messiness and what to clean up and what to heal. Sometimes when we look in that same mirror, we can see our vanity. The Lord says, there was a rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, who feasted sumptuously every day, and at his gate lay a poor person named Lazarus, full of sores, who desired to be fed by what fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked at his sore. So we see here Lazarus and the rich man being mirrors to one another. Lazarus' poor physical body is now a reflection of the rich man's soul. Where Lazarus was hungry and naked and was licked by the dogs, so now the rich man's soul is naked and hungry and licked by the demons. The physical body of the rich man is a reflection of the soul of Lazarus. Whereas the rich man is clothed in purple and fine linen and lived in comfort, the soul now of Lazarus is clothed in purple and fine linen and in comfort in the bosom of Abraham. So what kind of mirror do we use to see our own soul? And there are many. We can use other people to see our own soul. And my dear ones, although we don't like this, our spouses are sometimes our best mirrors. Our spouses are the ones who sometimes maybe see our greatest faults and our goods. And it's a good thing to pay attention to those. The things we create. My wife just winked at me, by the way. The things we create can be a reflection of what's in our soul. Our spiritual father is a good mirror for our soul. The things that we spend our time on are a reflection of our soul. And I learned this last weekend when I was away from you. Sickness can be a reflection of what the soul is like and how we deal with it. My dear ones, in a couple weeks, we are going to be entering into the Advent fast. And as I think I tell everybody, when we enter into fast, there are always three aspects to a fast. Yes, there is the restriction from food and types of food, but a fast is also made up of prayer and almsgiving. The particular fast that we're going to be entering upon, the Advent fast, though, is recognized for the fact of its almsgiving, that we should give or help another human being. And today's gospel message is also another, you might say, hint at the fact that we must recognize the needy and help when we can. And in doing this, we learn to see Christ in every single person. This last week, while I was suffering in my own pain, I learned about a new saint that is commemorated in 2 days. This is St. George, the confessor of John. And the reason I know that is because one of our mothers-to-be is going to be having her baby on Tuesday, and little George is going to be named after this saint. And so I wanted to bring out a couple of things about this saint. St. George was born in Podos in 1901, orphaned at a very young age, and so his pious grandmother raised him in the church. At the age of 5, he began tending his family flock. Can you imagine that, 5-year-old? 5. Can you imagine raising sheep? No, right. In the meantime, though, his bigger brother was horrible to him and his sister. I mean, outright cruel to them. And so he lived with his younger sister Anna and his brother. And his sister and his brother and him bore his brother with patience and love. His sister Anna died at a young age. And Anna, it is said that light emanated from her grave. 3 years later, they actually exhumed her body, and they found that her remains were just beautiful. I mean, they weren't incorrupt, but they were her bones and everything were just a beautiful color. St. George would end up taking a relic of his sister with him all the rest of his days of his life. Would carry a relic of his sister with him all the time. When George was 7, faced by all of the torment that he was facing, he runs away and eventually makes it to a place where a pious priest takes him in, and by the age of 9, clothes him in a cassock And by the time he is 19, he is tonsured a monk. And at the tonsure, by the way, it ends up the bells of the tower of the church where he's tonsured at end up ringing by themselves. The priest was so impressed by his spirituality and maturity that he endured, especially at this time, many sufferings from, especially the communists that were there. They were imprisoned, they were beaten, they were starved. At one time, after a Pascha event, they were led up onto a cliff and he was shot at. The bullets basically only grazed him and they threw him off a cliff and he survived. After he was released from prison in 1930, he was made a priest. And it was said that at the Divine Liturgy, people could see his feet levitating off the ground. I don't expect you to see that from me. He dedicated and founded a monastery, the Holy Ascension, in 1939. And upon being revealed that he would die in 1959, he had his assistants help him to the liturgy where he partook of the Eucharist, went back to his cell, and shortly after midnight on the 4th of November 1959, he reposed. There are a couple of beautiful quotes that I wanted to bring out, especially that relate to today. He says, "If you pray without giving alms, your prayer is dead. Your hand should always be open. Give alms to orphans and to widows. Alms and prayer go together." And then he said, "Strive to intensify your faith. And during the Divine Liturgy, be undistracted and attached to the celebration of the service, so that you might be granted to behold the majesties of God." Now, this is a man who levitated at the altar. My dear ones, this is also one of the reasons why it is so important to read and learn about the lives of the saints, because they offer another mirror to us. A lot of times when we read the lives of the saints, we look and say, "Oh, they are so holy. How can I be like that?" Especially, we take each and every one of us a patron saint as we come into the Orthodox Church. But this is not so that we can be discouraged by what we see, but to start this life, continual life of striving to be more and more like those saints that we read about and the ones that we take on ourselves. Because if we start to emulate, even in a small way, the lives that we read about, like St. George, or St. Lazarus that we read about in the Gospel today, then our hearts starts to turn more and more to God. And it starts to stay there. And their love of God becomes our love of God. And that love of God then becomes also a love of human beings, of others around us. And then doing this, our soul becomes a reflection of Lazarus' soul, who is the one who was comforted in the bosom of Abraham. So my dear ones, read more and more about the lives of the saints as you can. In this season that is coming up, especially for the Nativity, find ways to give alms. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God.